The plane was a black speck against the white sky, and then it was nothing at all. I stood on the ice-crusted landing strip until the sound of its engines faded into the perpetual wind, leaving me with 6 months of silence and a station built for 12. The Twin Glaciers Research Outpost sprawled behind me like a mechanical corpse, 3 prefab modules connected by corrugated corridors, surrounded by nothing but ice and the darkening sky. February in Antarctica. The sun had set 2 weeks ago and wouldn't rise again until August. I shouldered my pack and walked back to the main module. My boots crunched on the packed snow, the sound too loud in the absence of the others. Sato had hugged me before she boarded, her face tight with that mixture of gratitude and pity that I'd come to hate. She'd been the last to leave, the final connection to the world of light and warmth and other human voices. Now there was only me, the generators, and the ice that stretched in every direction to the horizon and beyond. The station had been my home for 3 months already, but it felt different now. When the team of 12 was here, the place had been crowded, noisy, alive, with the bustle of scientific work and the constant negotiation of shared space. Now the corridors echoed with my footsteps, and every room seemed to absorb sound like a hungry mouth. I settled into the largest bunk room, surrounded by 11 empty beds with mattresses rolled tight, and tried to convince myself that the solitude was peaceful. I was the communications officer, responsible for maintaining the satellite uplinks and weather monitoring equipment that fed data back to McMurdo and Christchurch. It was technical work, solitary by nature even when others were present. I'd volunteered for the wintering over position because I was 32 and single and had no one waiting for me back in New Zealand, and because I genuinely believed that 6 months of isolation would be restorative, a chance to read, to think, to be truly alone with my thoughts, in a way that modern life never allowed. The first week, I almost convinced myself I was right. I established a routine that mirrored the station's automated rhythms. The generators hummed their constant drone. The heaters clicked and sighed in the walls. I maintained the equipment, recorded atmospheric data, cooked elaborate meals for one from the frozen stores, and watched the same 20 movies on the hard drive until I could recite the dialogue. I slept 9 hours a night and woke to the same darkness that had surrounded me when I closed my eyes. The absence of light became normal, then comforting. There was something pure about the night that never ended, something that stripped away the illusions of civilization and left only essential truths. It was on the 8th day that I noticed the first anomaly. I'd been checking the seismic sensors in the auxiliary module when I felt it. A vibration through the floor, too rhythmic to be machinery. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, like footsteps in the corridor below the grating. I held my breath and listened, but the station's ambient noise swallowed it, and when I checked the lower level, I found only pipes and frost-covered machinery. I told myself it was ice shifting or the water pump cycling. I almost believed it. That night, I found the door to the storage locker open. Not just unlocked, standing wide open, as if someone had been searching for something. The interior was dark, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement in the shadows. But when I switched on the light, there was only shelving and the ghostly smell of the previous season's supplies. I checked the door log on the security panel, but it showed no activity. The door had been sealed since the team departed, or so the system claimed. I checked the station archives. The Twin Glaciers Research Outpost had been occupied continuously for 8 years, ever since the International Polar Research Consortium established it as a climate monitoring station. Before that, it had been a British survey outpost in the 1970s, and before that, nothing but ice. I was the 14th wintering officer to serve a solo rotation, though most crews preferred to stay for the full year rather than risk the psychological toll of isolation. I found the files for the others, psych evaluations, medical records, routine reports, all unremarkable, except for one. Elias Hendricks had wintered here in 2019. His official final report was standard: equipment status, data summaries, a note about a broken coffee maker. But his personal logs, which I found buried in an encrypted subdirectory labeled wintering during a routine system maintenance, told a different story entirely. I spent the second week reading them compulsively, curled in the comms room with a bottle of scotch that tasted like peat and regret. My eyes growing dry from staring at the screen in the dim light. Hendricks had been a meteorologist, 53 years old, on his third Antarctic posting. His first entries were familiar, the same observations about silence, the same attempts to establish routine, the same philosophical musings about the nature of isolation. But by week 3, he'd started hearing things. He wrote,
"Footsteps in Module C. The station has a specific acoustic signature, a kind of white noise that I've learned to read like a pulse. Tonight, there's a second heartbeat beneath it, something that doesn't belong to the machinery."
By week 5, he was describing shapes in the ice outside the station windows.
"They stand at the edge of the floodlight's reach, humanoid, but wrong, too thin, too tall. They don't move when I watch them, but if I look away and back, they've shifted closer. I tried photographing them, but the lens captures only snow and shadow. I think they exist in the spaces between moments, in the gaps where light hasn't reached yet."
The entries became fragmented, increasingly paranoid. He'd started exploring the ice caves beneath the station, which weren't in any of the official maps or geological surveys. He wrote,
"The thermal vents create caverns down there, warmth in the abyss. I can feel it calling through the floor. They're showing me the way down, opening paths that weren't there yesterday. The ice is alive, Marcus. It remembers everyone who ever walked on it, and it wants us to come home."
His final entry was dated August 14th, 3 days before the relief team arrived.
"I'm going to meet them, the ones who walk between stations. They've been waiting so long for someone to stay, to really stay. I won't be alone anymore. I won't be cold."
They found him in an ice cave 200 meters below the station, frozen, solid, sitting upright as if in meditation. The official report cited hypothermia and psychological breakdown due to isolation-induced psychosis. They'd sealed the cave entrance with concrete and installed new heating systems. No one mentioned the second set of footprints leading down into the darkness alongside his, or the way Hendrix's face had been frozen in an expression of rapturous joy rather than pain. The photographs were attached to the incident file. 6 of them, taken by the relief team's medical officer on a cheap digital camera with a flash that washed everything to bone white. I looked at all 6 more times than was good for me. In the 4th one, the flash caught the ice wall behind him, and the wall was not empty. There were shapes in it. The medical officer had circled nothing and noted nothing. He had filed the images and moved on with his life. I pulled the station's personnel history next. 14 wintering officers in 8 years, myself included. 6 had completed their rotations and gone home. 2 had been evacuated for medical reasons in the first month. Hendricks had died. The remaining 5 were listed as transferred to inland field stations at the end of their terms. I looked up the field stations. 2 had been decommissioned years before the transfers were logged. 1 had never existed at all. There was a group photograph in the archive, taken the summer before Hendricks wintered. 12 people on the ice apron in front of Module A, squinting into a sun that hadn't set in weeks. I counted them twice, because the roster listed 11. The extra figure stood at the back, half a head taller than anyone else, out of focus, in a way that the rest of the image was not. Nobody's shoulder overlapped it. Nobody leaned into it. It was simply there, and every person in that photograph was smiling. I closed the file. I have not opened it since. I read those logs until my eyes burned, and then I tried to forget them. I told myself it was stress, isolation psychosis, the mind inventing companions where none existed. I was a rational man. I believed in data and verifiable phenomena. I forced myself back into my routine, checking equipment, recording data, pretending that the silence was still peaceful. Twice a week, I had a scheduled contact window with McMurdo. 11 minutes, satellite dependent, mostly telemetry handshakes, and a voice check to confirm that the station's one human being was still functioning. It was the only conversation I had with anyone. I looked forward to it the way a prisoner looks forward to mail. The operator that season was a woman named Ainsley Rua. She had a flat Midwestern accent and a habit of narrating her own coffee. On the 18th day, halfway through the window, she stopped mid-sentence.
Twin Glaciers, McMurdo. Telemetry's coming through clean, all green across the board. Weather's holding at your grid. You're logged as... Hold on. Say again your station designation for me?
I said it again. I spelled it. I gave her my name, my rotation number, and the consortium file code printed on the laminated card taped to the console. The pause went on long enough that I checked the signal strength twice.
That's strange. Our seasonal roster has Twin Glaciers dark this year. No wintering assignment, no personnel on site, just an automated package phoning home. I'm looking right at it. Let me kick it up to operations, and I'll come back to you next window. Don't lose sleep over it. Paperwork goes missing down here all the time.
She did not come back to me next window. The window opened on schedule. The handshake completed. The channel stayed open for its full 11 minutes and carried nothing but carrier wave, which is not silence, but a soft, granular hiss, like sand shifting in a jar. I said her name 11 times. I logged all of it. The window after that, a man answered. He was polite and efficient and had never heard of Ainsley Rue. He confirmed my telemetry, confirmed my rotation, wished me a good night, and closed the channel 40 seconds early. I sat with my hand on the microphone long after the light went out. I am not claiming that McMurdo forgot me. I'm saying that something answered on their frequency, and that it was very good at sounding like a bored man at the end of a long shift. Then I heard the footsteps myself. It was week 4, and I was in the kitchen preparing rehydrated beef stew when the sound came from the corridor outside. Distinct, heavy, boots on metal. 3 steps, then silence. I dropped my spoon and yanked open the door, but the corridor was empty, stretching 20 meters to the junction where Module A met Module B. The emergency lights cast everything in red shadow. I walked the length of it, checking each room, each locker, finding nothing but the station's mechanical breathing and my own thundering heart. I started locking doors after that. I stopped sleeping in the big bunk room and moved to the smallest compartment, wedging a chair under the handle. I kept the radio on constantly, scanning frequencies for any voice, any signal from the outside world. Static, always static, except for the automated weather beacons that chirped their data in mechanical Morse code. I began sleeping with a flashlight in my hand and a wrench under my pillow. 2 nights later, I found the prints. Module C is cold storage, held at -15, and unheated by design. Frost grows on the floor there, in a fine gray fur that takes an impression perfectly. I went in for a box of coffee filters and stopped 3 steps past the threshold. There were boot prints in the frost. They began in the middle of the room, not at the door in the middle, directly under the light, as though someone had arrived there without crossing the space between. They led to the far wall and stopped. The wall is steel panel over insulation over 200 meters of ice. I set my own boot beside one for comparison. Mine is a size 11. The print in the frost was longer by the width of my hand and narrower, and the toe was wrong, too pointed. It looked less like a boot than like something wearing the idea of a boot. I photographed them with my phone. The photograph shows an empty floor. After that, I started reading the station's body language, and the generator log was the thing that broke me. Twin Glaciers runs 2 diesel units on rotation, and the load curve is a fingerprint. 12 people, cooking and showering and running lab centrifuges, draw a certain shape. 1 man reheating rations draws a much smaller one. I had been watching my own curve for weeks. A low flat line with a bump at dinner and a shallow rise when I ran the heaters at night. For 19 consecutive days, it had not been my curve. It was the 12-person curve. Heaters cycling in modules I had sealed and taped. Water draw in the shower block at 0600 every morning. A full 10-minute run, hot. Lights in the lab that I had switched off and locked behind me. The station was being lived in. I was simply not invited to the part of it where that happened. I stopped sleeping properly, so I did what people do when they cannot sleep and cannot leave. I watched the tapes. The station keeps a low-frame security capture at every corridor junction. 1 frame every 4 seconds, 30 days on the buffer. Nobody had reviewed it in years. I pulled the whole month and ran it at speed with a mug of instant coffee going cold beside my hand. For 20 minutes of playback, there was nothing. Empty corridors. My own figure crossing them at intervals, hunched, moving fast. A man I barely recognized. Then, at 3:14 on the 9th day, I walked into frame at the junction outside the lower level door, and I stopped, and I stood there. I stood there for 41 minutes. I did not move. My arms hung at my sides. My face was turned toward the door. The timestamp crawled forward, frame by frame, and in the flat gray of the infrared, I looked like a coat somebody had hung on a nail. At 3:55, I turned and walked back toward my compartment, and the corridor was empty again. I have no memory of it. Not a dream, not a fragment, not the residue of having been awake. I found it again on the 11th day, the 14th, the 15th, and 16th, back to back. Always 3:14. Always the same 41 minutes. Always that slack, patient posture. A man waiting for a bus in a place that has never had one. On the 17th day, the recording was different. I stood at the door as usual. At the 38th minute, my head tilted. It went much further than a neck should allow, until my ear was nearly flat against my shoulder, and it held there for 4 frames, 16 seconds, regarding nothing. Then I raised my right hand and waved at the camera. I watched those 4 frames until the coffee had a skin on it. Whatever stood in that corridor knew the camera was there. It knew I would eventually look. It wanted me to understand that it had seen me first. In week 5, I found the door to the lower level standing open. This was the maintenance sub-level, officially closed off due to structural concerns, the same level that led to the caves where they'd found Hendrix. I knew I hadn't opened it. I'd been avoiding that part of the station entirely, taking the long way around to reach the generator room, my skin prickling whenever I passed the stairwell. The stairwell descended into absolute darkness. The emergency lighting didn't extend below the main floor. I stood at the threshold with a flashlight, telling myself to close the door, to lock it, to return to my routine and pretend I'd never seen it. Instead, I heard my voice whisper into the dark. "Hello?" The echo came back wrong, too slow, too many syllables, as if the darkness itself had answered. I didn't go down that day. I closed the door and wedged it shut with a fire extinguisher, then spent 3 hours checking every camera feed, every sensor log. Nothing had triggered the motion detectors. The door logs showed no activity. According to the station's electronic brain, that door had remained sealed since the maintenance team departed in November. But I knew what I'd seen, and that night, lying in my barricaded room, I heard the footsteps again. This time, they stopped outside my door. I didn't sleep. I stared at the door handle, waiting for it to turn, listening to the silence that pressed against the station like a physical weight. When morning came, though, morning meant only the shift from black to deep blue in the sky. I knew I couldn't continue this way. I needed to understand what was happening, or I would end up like Hendrix, frozen in the ice, with a smile on my face. I armed myself with a crowbar from the tool locker and descended into the lower level. The stairs creaked in ways they shouldn't have, metal fatigued by years of cold and something else, something that sounded almost like breathing. My flashlight beam carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, revealing pipes and conduits that vanished into the shadows. The air grew warmer as I descended, which was impossible. The station sat on 200 meters of permafrost, but I could feel it against my face, a subtle current rising from below, carrying a scent like wet stone and something else, something organic and ancient that had no business existing in this frozen waste. I passed the concrete plug on the 7th step from the bottom. It was still there, poured in 2019 by men who wanted very badly to go home. A gray slab, a meter thick, keyed into the rock on either side. It had not been broken. It had not been drilled or cut or blasted. The passage simply went around it now, through rock that had been solid when the concrete was poured, curving away to the left and rejoining itself below like water finding a way past a stone. At the bottom, I found the cave entrance, It shouldn't have existed. The official maps showed only foundation and ice, but there it was, a passage carved into the bedrock, roughly circular, large enough to walk through standing upright. The walls were smooth, glazed with a sheen that my flashlight couldn't quite penetrate, as if the stone itself absorbed light, and the warmth was coming from inside, pulsing like a heartbeat. I thought of Hendrix, sitting frozen in meditation. I thought of the footprints leading down. I should have turned back. I should have radioed McMurdo and confessed everything, demanded immediate evacuation, regardless of the cost. But I didn't. I stepped into the cave, and the warmth wrapped around me like a blanket, and I understood why Hendrix had kept coming back, why he hadn't been able to stay away. It was not the warmth of a heater. Heaters push at you. This came up through the soles of my boots and settled behind my sternum and stayed. The way a good meal stays, the way a room stays warm after people have been laughing in it. 12 weeks of cold went out of me in the space of 4 breaths, and I stood in the mouth of that passage and felt something I had not felt since the plane left, and the word for it was welcome. The passage descended gradually, spiraling deeper into the ice. After 50 meters, the walls changed. They weren't stone anymore, they were ice, but ice that glowed with a faint phosphorescence, blue and green and violet, revealing shapes suspended within. I stopped and pressed my face close to the wall, and I saw them. Figures, humanoid, frozen in the glacier like insects in amber. Dozens of them, hundreds. They wore the clothing of different eras, wool and fur, synthetic fibers. One in a canvas jacket that might have dated to the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. All of them were reaching upward, their faces twisted in expressions of ecstasy or terror. I couldn't tell which. Deeper in, the arrangement changed, and that was worse than the number of them. I found the orange parkas in a pocket of ice, perhaps 4 meters across. Consortium issue, the same shell I had worn every day since November. There were 13. They were not scattered the way bodies fall. They were set spaced at even intervals, all facing the passage, seated, hands folded, like an audience arranged before a stage that had not yet been built. The 14th position was empty, a hollow in the ice, exactly the shape of a person, smooth-walled, clean, no tool marks, and no melt. It sat at the end of the row. It was my size. I found myself 2 meters further down. Not a man in my jacket. Me. The scar on the bridge of my nose from a bicycle when I was 9. The way my left eyebrow grows against itself, which no photograph has ever caught correctly. My mouth was open, and my arms were raised, and my eyes were closed. And the ice around me was old, layered, blue, compressed by centuries into something like glass. I put my palm flat against the wall in front of my own frozen face, because I am the sort of man who has to touch a thing before he will believe it. The eyes opened. They found mine through 1/2 meter of ancient ice, and they were glad to see me. That is what broke something in me. Not fear, recognition. The face in the wall looked at me the way you look at someone coming through an arrival's gate after a very long flight. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The glacier was 2 million years old, but these figures wore modern clothing. One of them, I realized with dawning horror, wore the same patch on the shoulder that identified me as communications officer. I ran. I don't remember making the decision, but I was suddenly running back up the passage, the crowbar clutched in my sweating hand, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the glowing walls. Behind me, I heard the footsteps again, not following, but ahead of me, waiting at the entrance to the station. Multiple sets. The sound of a crowd, gathered in the dark, shuffling and patient. I burst into the lower level and slammed the door behind me, wedging it with the crowbar. I backed away, staring at the metal, waiting for it to bulge inward, for whatever was down there to follow me up. But nothing happened. The silence returned, complete and absolute, though I could feel the warmth still radiating from beneath the floor. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I sat in the comms room with every light blazing, monitoring the sensors, waiting for something to appear on the cameras. Nothing did. The station remained empty, silent, isolated. But I knew better now. I knew what was beneath us. What had been waiting for someone to return to join them in the warmth. On the 6th week, the radio crackled. I'd been dozing at the console, my head nodding forward in exhaustion, when the static shifted. A voice emerged, faint and distorted, speaking words I couldn't understand. It sounded like Hendrix, like his voice in the logs I'd listened to 100 times. I grabbed the microphone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "This is Twin Glaciers. Come in. Who is this? Please identify." The voice paused, then clear and close as if speaking directly into my ear.
"Marcus, you've been listening for so long. Come down and join us. We're waiting, where it's warm."
I ripped the headphones off and backed away from the console. The voice had been inside my head, as much as in the speakers. I could still feel it, a pressure behind my eyes, a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the heaters. It felt like belonging. 3 days later, it tried something better. I had not touched the console since. The set was powered down, the headphones coiled on the desk. The breaker pulled, and the wire taped back on itself. It spoke anyway, at volume, in a voice I knew. It was Dr. Sato, Ilse. I had watched her climb the boarding stairs in February, with her hood down, and her face pinched with that pity I could not forgive her for, and now she was in the room with me.
Marcus, it's Ilse. We've been trying to raise you for 11 days. Nobody is angry with you. There's an aircraft on your strip and a medical team on board, and all you have to do is come outside and let us look at you. I'm standing at the door. Marcus. I'm at the door, and it is very cold out here.
I ran the full length of Module A, with my coat unzipped and my boots unlaced, and I hauled the outer hatch open into 60 knots of wind and absolute dark. There was no aircraft. There was no strip light, no beacon, no engine noise carrying on the wind. There was no Ilse. There were prints in the snow outside the hatch, filling fast. They did not approach the door from anywhere. They began at the threshold and went away from it in a straight, unhurried line toward the lower vent stack and the ice beyond. Getting that hatch closed took both hands and everything I had left. Then I sat down against it on the floor and laughed until it turned into something else. Here is why I am still alive to write this down. Ilse Sato is a real woman with a real apartment in Wellington and a real fear of small aircraft. She never learned what any of them were called. For 3 months, in every conversation, she said, "The plane." Always. The thing at my door said, "An aircraft," and it said it smoothly, and it got every other detail perfect. The cadence, the flattened vowels, the way she leaned on my name when she wanted my attention. Something that has been listening to human beings since before there were nations still cannot tell which detail is the one that matters. That night, I found myself standing at the door to the lower level. I don't remember walking there. The crowbar was gone, the door standing open, the darkness below breathing warmth up into my face. I was wearing my coat. My boots were laced. I was ready to descend, and some part of me, a part that felt like it was waking up after a long sleep, wanted to go. Wanted to join them. Wanted to be warm. I fought it. I slammed the door and ran to the emergency supplies, searching for anything that might help. Flares. A satellite phone that had no signal, a shotgun with shells for polar bears that had never been seen this far inland. I loaded it and sat with my back to the wall, facing the door, waiting for morning or for death, whichever came first. The footsteps came at midnight, not one set, but many. They filled the corridors, moving through the station, like water through pipes, surrounding my position. I heard voices Hendrix and others I didn't recognize, speaking in a language that sounded like ice cracking and wind howling. They were inviting me. They were welcoming me home. I raised the shotgun and fired into the darkness. The blast was deafening in the confined space, and for a moment, the footsteps stopped. Then, they resumed, closer now, and I felt something touch my shoulder cold and warm at the same time, like the caves below, like the embrace of the ice itself. I emptied the shotgun. I don't know if I hit anything. The footsteps retreated, but I could feel them waiting at the edges of my vision, patient as glaciers, patient as stone. In the ringing afterward, someone knocked. 3 knocks. Unhurried, evenly spaced, the way a neighbor knocks. Then he spoke, and I knew the voice at once, because I had listened to 4 hours of his audio logs until I could hear him breathing between sentences.
You don't have to open it, Marcus. That's the part nobody ever works out in time. The door was never keeping them out. It was keeping you alone. Sit with that a while. I sat with it for 5 months and 11 days before I heard it properly, and then I couldn't unhear it, and neither will you. You are not being hunted, you are being invited. There is a difference, and you'll feel it the second you stop bracing for the other one. Take your time. We've got nothing but that.
That was 3 days ago. I've barricaded myself in the comms module with the remaining flares and what little food I could carry. The supply plane isn't due for another 10 weeks. I can hear them moving through the other modules at night, opening and closing doors, maintaining the station as if they live here. Sometimes they speak to me through the walls, telling me about the warmth, about the community waiting below, about how isolation is a choice and I can choose otherwise. I have been counting the sounds. There are 12, 11 that move and 1 that only breathes, somewhere under the floor of Module B, slow and enormous, and entirely unbothered by any of this. I'm writing this by hand because the computers have stopped working properly. The screens show only images of the caves now, the glowing walls, the figures reaching upward. My handwriting is deteriorating. My hands are cold despite the heat that rises from the floor vents, the warmth that they send up to comfort me. I understand now what Twin Glaciers really is. Not a research station, but a lure. A light in the darkness that draws the isolated, the alone, the ones who think they can survive 6 months of silence. The ice has been here for millions of years, and it has learned to hunger for company. Hendrix is down there, preserved perfectly. Part of the glacier now, part of the community. They all are. Every wintering officer who ever thought they could endure the dark alone. I keep coming back to the empty place in the ice. The 14th seat, smooth-walled, clean, exactly my size. Nobody carved that. It was already there. It was there before the consortium, before the British survey, before the first ship ever came south carrying men who believed the ice was only weather. It has been waiting for a shape to fill it, and it has been very patient, and it has never once been wrong about who was coming. The footsteps are outside my door. They're not trying to break in anymore. They know I'll come out eventually. The warmth is so inviting, and the silence out here is so complete, so crushing, so much worse than any death I could imagine below. I'm opening the door now. I'm going to join them. The ice remembers everyone, and I don't want to be alone anymore. Tell them I found what I was looking for. Tell them I'm warm